Chapter 7, Working Backward. For problems that involve a series of events and you know the end but are asked to determine the situation in the beginning, you can use working backward to reverse the actions until you get to the beginning condition. This is a very interesting question. A farmer brought some eggs to sell at a market. He sold half of the eggs to the first customer and he gave out extra half of an egg. He then sold half of the remaining eggs to the second customer and also gave out half of an egg to the second customer. And the same thing happened for the third customer, meaning he sold half of the remaining eggs and then he gave out half of an egg to the third customer. And now the farmer has no more eggs. So how many eggs did the farmer bring to sell in the beginning? It's kind of interesting. How could he give out half of an egg? Okay, so let's solve this one using working backward. Okay, so we can use a chart like this to indicate the sequence of the events. So in the beginning, and he had some eggs, and then later on he sold half of the eggs to the first customer, and then he gave out half of an egg to the first customer. He then sold half of the remaining eggs to the second customer, and then gave out half of an egg to the second person, and then he sold half of the remaining eggs to the third customer, and then he gave out half of an egg to that third customer, and then he got no more. Okay, so let's work backward. So at the end, he got no more, meaning he got 0. And then one step backward. So, and that 0 was obtained after he gave out half of an egg. So before he gave out half of an egg, he must have 1/2 of an egg. And that was after he sold half to the third customer. So before he sold half to the third customer, he must have 1 whole egg. So you see that we are going backward. Like when you sell half, it's like you divide by 2. But then when you go backward, you need to multiply by 2. So you take 1/2 and multiply by 2 to get back to 1. And we call that the inverse operation, like the opposite of the operation. Okay, let's continue with working backward. So before he gave out half of the egg to the second customer, he must have 1.5 egg at that point, right? And then that was after he sold half to the second customer. So before he sold half to the second customer, let's multiply the 1.5 by 2, and then he must have 3 eggs at that point. And the 3 was after he gave out half egg to the first customer. So before that, he must have 3.5. Okay, instead of subtract, now we go back. We do the inverse operation, which is add. And then that 3.5 egg was after he sold half to the first customer. So let's multiply by 2 as our inverse operation. So 3.5 multiplied by 2 is 7. Okay, so that means in the beginning the farmer had 7 eggs. You can always check your answer by following the sequence of events. So now we believe that the answer is 7. So let's see if that's true. So he started with 7. He sold half to the first customer. That means he sold 3.5 eggs. And then at that point, he should have 3.5 eggs left. And then he gave out half egg from that 3.5. So you subtract. Then he was left with 3 eggs. And then he sold half of the remaining 3 eggs to the second customer. That means he sold 1.5. So at that point, he got 1.5 eggs left. And then he gave out 1/2 egg to the second customer. That means he got only 1 egg left. And then he sold half to the third customer, meaning he sold 1/2 of an egg. And he got 1/2 egg left. And then he just gave that out to the third customer. So at the end, he just got nothing left. And we just check the work and it is correct. Okay, here's another example. I was thinking of a number. I divided it by 2 and subtracted 6 from the quotient. Then I took square root of the difference and added 1 to the square root. Finally, I took the square root of the sum, and finally, the result was 3. What was my original number? Okay, so a lot of steps have happened before I got the final result, which was 3. Okay, so we can do this. So again, we can use charts to help us. So we had a number in the beginning, which I don't know what it is, so I put a question mark here. And then I divided that by 2. And then I subtracted 6 from the quotient. And then I did the square root after the subtraction. And then I added 1. And then finally, I took square root again to get to 3. So 3 is the final answer. So now we need to go backward, all the way back, okay, to the beginning. So at the end, I got 3, but that was after I took the square root. So now I need to do the inverse operation of square root. The inverse operation of square root is square. So what number did I take square root such that I reach 3? And the number must be 9. Okay, I just do 3 square because square is the inverse operation of square root. So 3 square is 9. And 9 was obtained after I added 1. So I need to do the inverse operation of adding, which is subtracting. So I subtract 1 from 9. And then I got 8. And 8 was the result after I took the square root. So before I took the square root, so let's do the inverse operation of square root, meaning do the square of 8, which is 64. And I got 64 after I subtracted 6. So let's add 6 back to 64. That means at that point, I had 70. And 70 was the result after I divided by 2. So let's multiply 2 back to 70 to get the number before I divided it, which is 140. So the number that I started with was 140. Here I have 2 problems for you to solve. You may want to use working backward. Pause the video and give it a try. When you're ready, you can resume the video. Okay, so here are the answers to the 2 problems. For the first problem, again we use a chart, and then all we need to do is we would begin from the end and go backward. And for each operation that we performed in the beginning, we would do the inverse operation. So for instance, the last step was like spend $10 more, meaning like subtract 10. And so the inverse operation is addition. And for this step here, we spent half, meaning divide by 2. So the inverse operation is multiply by 2, etc. And then for the answer to number 2, I just used a chart to show how many books each person had at different stage. And so this is basically the chart that I used to record how many books each person had at different stage. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Thank you for watching.